Hi, I'm Nate. I did used to live and work in Saskatoon. I'll try and go through this really quickly. I worked at VividWorks, then FrontLogic, which was originally called cdhitlist.com. CDs, compact discs, giving you an idea of when that was. Then to Zoo, then Point 2, then to OmniLogic, which was in Regina, then to Point 2, which is now called Yardi, then back to Zoo. And I almost did Zoo twice there because I was at Zoo, then I went on paternity leave, then I came back, but I didn't fully come back. It was like I was hanging out in the office. And now I only come back to visit because I live in Victoria. But honestly, I'm jealous of most of the people in this room that you get to work with the folks at Zoo. Like I come back and I get to hang out and see some of the faces of people that I used to work with, and they're incredible and they're amazing. And Zoo and the people there are really something special to me. Okay, so back then, I gave a talk at my first talk at Bar Camp, which was held in the basement of Winston's in 2008. I talked about a few simple A/B tests that I did to prove the saying, the design saying, if you can't make it bigger, make it red, and just proving that there was something there that people would prefer the bigger or the redder version. And it took me a few weeks to go through all my old backups and stuff to find a copy of that presentation. And like in my mind, it was so funny and clever, and I liked it so much. And then I was looking back at it, and I was just cringing, not really enjoying it as much as I thought. It definitely needed to be in the basement of Winston's after a few pints to be fully appreciated. But these are two slides, so you can see I'm showing the results of my little test. And then I ended with, what was very funny and cutting edge at the time. Okay, thanks, bye. And really, I've been experimenting ever since at every job I've ever had. And when I joined Twitter, I found that really big tech experiments a lot. They run a lot of tests, truly. And this is an article in the New Yorker about big test running experiments. This is just from this year. So honestly, it happens a lot. And I'm going to talk about that today, about the experimentation that I've seen and heard about in big tech, and how and why big tech runs so many experiments, and how you might be able to apply it to your own business. And I'll talk about how cool I am and what I think of Elon Musk. That is the nicest version of that sentence. I revised that many times, and I just decided to be kind. So, welcome to my talk, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Data. It's okay. I'm a bit of a film buff, so it could also be everything, everywhere, all at data. Okay. Maybe Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Data? All right. How about Crouching Tiger Everywhere, Mr. Data? All right. Also today, I just want to say, Albert should have that timer going. I'm going to go way over time. Sorry, I'll try and tune up. Oh, okay. I'm not going to talk on behalf of Pinterest, officially. I'm not going to share concrete examples from Pinterest either. I just can't do that. I can talk a lot about Twitter and my time there, and generally stuff I've seen and learned along the way. I think you'll get a vibe for what I'm talking about. Also, I want to apologize. This is like my big apology screen. Actually, I make 2 more apologies. I'm sorry. That's, I'm not going to mention AI. I know I should be talking about AI. I love AI, but it just does not fit. And I'm sorry, I didn't even use AI to make my talk like I should have. It would be better. There were a few times when I was workshopping this talk, I've never given it before. You're gonna tell, it's obvious. But I would run ideas past it, and sometimes ChatGPT would be like, "Oh, that's really good and insightful." I'm like, "Yeah, it is." And then, or I would show it, give it an idea, and it's like, there are weaknesses in your argument. I'm like, "You don't know what you're talking about." So this is truly all my fault. So let's begin. What is an experiment when I say that big tech experiments? Well, just like in Bar Camp, the most basic experiment that I'm sure all of you have heard is an A/B test. That's where you run 2 different versions of something. You have a blue buy now button, and you have a red buy now button, and you show half of your users one, and you show the other half of your users the other version, and then you just see which one does better. Also called a split test, basically the same multivariate test. Is just saying, okay, instead of 2 versions, we now have 3 versions, red, blue, green, or so on. And then experiment is the more general term. And that's what we talk about in big tech. We run experiments. And why we use experiment, there's two reasons. One is it's more flexible, because sometimes you're making multiple changes at once. So say at Twitter, we have a tweet, we could move the title to the top, or we could move the title of the article you've shared a different color, or instead of putting the description, we can put the domain name you're going to go to. And so we run a lot of different versions sometimes. And so experiment is also a more flexible term. It's also that big tech thing of like making things sound more rigorous and more, I don't know, something else. Like, we're not programmers, we're software engineers. They are not data analysts or data scientists. And these aren't multivariate tests, they are experiments. So the next question is, why experiment? Well, we experiment to improve something. And just like in science proper, where we steal the term experiment, also to learn something or to validate something. So we think we know something, let's run a test, an experiment to make sure. And I'm going to get to this at the end, but we also experiment really to hurt your feelings, to take your good ideas and prove with data that they are not good ideas. And then I know what your next question is, of course, is why? Follow up the why with a why. Why does big tech experiment? Well, there's two reasons that big tech does a lot of experiments. Basically, due to the scale that big tech has, basically makes it pretty cheap. Like, if you need to run an experiment on a very subtle change, and you have 500 million monthly users like Facebook does, you can get it in front of 1 million users in a few days, maybe an afternoon, depending on what part of the site it's on. And you have a lot of employees with a lot of dedicated roles, so it's not that expensive to run the experiment. So that's why big tech does it. But then you're like, why really do they run experiments? Why are they doing this? But why? And this is where I like to be on the second day. I didn't choose that, but I like it because someone can give an excellent talk like yesterday, and you can go back to your hotel room and add a slide as a reaction. Because when I saw Synac's Golden Circle, I'd never heard of that. I had heard of Synac before on my Instagram Reels, because that's what I use. And I saw that, and it reminded me, because I had this why in my talk, and I'm like, that's just like the children's Golden Circle. It's just why followed by why followed by why. And kids are really good at that. That's why I did that, because they're really good at digging into the truth of something. So that third why does big tech run experiments, is what I'm going to get to at the end of this talk. I'm going to tell you how we run experiments, and then I'm going to tell you why I really think we do it. And that why is why I think you should do it, because you may not have the scale of big tech, but you're going to have that third why I think there's real value. So the example I'm going to use to hopefully try and make this talk a little faster, so talk about big tech's most famous experiment, one of the earliest ones, and that's where Google optimized the color of blue of the links that they used in their search results. So they ran that experiment in 2009, and this is an article that came out a few years later. It's already 11 years old, right? So this is a few years later, but they had run this experiment. Let me tell you how they ran it. So first, a designer came up with the idea that they should run a slightly more green version of blue as the link color. And they ran a simple A/B test, like I was talking about in Barcamp, and they saw that the greener version got clicked on a little bit more. But then Google, being that big tech company with all the employees and all the users, they're like, well, how do we know that that is the best color of blue? Sure, it's better, but what's the best? So they're like, let's run 40 more shades of blue. And then they picked the one that performed best. So in that article I'd showed you, which is already quite old, but it was a few years after they ran the experiment, so I think it was 2011, they attributed $200 million in revenue to increased performance due to picking the perfect shade of blue. Now, that's another sign of the scale and why big tech does this, because they can do those little finicky tests and over time make quite a bit of money, right? They have the scale to do that. The other thing I want to point out is I gave my Barcamp talk in 2008, and they ran their test in 2009. So I was kind of cutting edge, I think. But okay, so let's talk about how big tech runs experiments. And it is a little bit rigorous. The first step is to come up with a hypothesis. What you think will happen, or what you think is at play. What are those assumptions that underline the change you want to make? The hypothesis changes it from being random trial and error to giving your test purpose. The other thing it does is, like I said, you often get your feelings hurt. So What a hypothesis allows you to do is to learn from the experiment, even if it fails, right? Because you know you're putting into words what you expected to happen, what you expected to be at play, and it didn't work out, but now you've learned something because you've figured out what you thought was going to happen didn't happen. The second thing you have to do is decide what you're going to measure. And this goes with the next step, but what does success look like? How do you know it's going to get better? Is that more clicks? Is that more visitors? Is that more conversions, people buying what it is? Or is it people more fully reading the article you have or reading more of your articles? You need to be specific about what you're going to measure. And the flip side of that is step 3, which is to set your guardrails. What are the sacrifices you are not willing to make for this improvement? If people click something more but do something else less, it's not successful. So for example, at Twitter, we had so many metrics, so many things we measure. Someone may click an article more, but perhaps they read fewer tweets. We have an idea of how many tweets you read each time you launch the app, how many tweets you look at before you went to a website or closed the app and did something else. So maybe people read more articles from Twitter, but they're viewing fewer tweets in general. And you're like, that, we're not willing to make that sacrifice. Okay, guardrails is a big part of my job at Twitter and my current job at Pinterest because I work in ads, specifically, very specifically. And I love this clip because this is my other apology. I have to say, I'm sorry I work in ads. I love this clip. Hopefully it plays. Let's see, is it? I think it's loading from YouTube. Here we go.
So, you know when you see like an ad banner online?
Oh yeah, God, I hate that shit.
Hey, come on.
No, I just mean like everybody hates that shit. You know?
Do they?
Well, yeah.
That's what I do. That's my
cool,
job.
man.
I sell those.
It's cool. It's cool.
Okay.
So you're making the world go around. It's
Yeah.
fine. It's not your fault. You're just like part of a fucked up system.
I mean, without online ads, actually, a lot of the websites that you visit for free wouldn't be able to exist. It's kind of like the lifeblood of the internet.
Hey, dude, I
Yeah.
think they want us to pay attention.
I really like that movie, by the way. And when that scene came on, I was just laughing. Like it's so true. I'm not really that guy, but I mean that's what it's like in ads. And so I want to say, sorry, I work in ads. Save your boos for the end. I'm going to give you lots more reasons to boo. When we talk about working in ads, guardrails are so important. Okay, because one thing you'll notice in online advertising, there's a way different vibe between the ads you see on Facebook, Meta, Twitter, at least old Twitter, and those sites that you get on that are covered in banner ads that you can't tell what's an ad, or the apps where the ad pops up and you can't figure out how to close it easily. They don't have guardrails. They don't care what they're sacrificing to get you to click that ad. Whereas we in big tech across, we're very careful with those trade-offs, and that's what a guardrail is. It's like, what am I not willing to give up? What is the user experience that I will not sacrifice to achieve this improvement? Okay, I'm done. We'll come back to ads in a bit. So then the next step is the fun step. You start the experiment. So design has come up with a design or multiple designs of what you want that exemplify what you wanted to achieve. Engineers have written the code. Everyone's excited, and you start the experiment. It started in prod, showing to 1% of users, and it's fun. That's the high point of this whole experience. You think the high point would be at the end when you say, yes, we're going to ship it. It's not. This is the high point. You're starting the experiment. It cannot be better than this because you have no reason to be sad. Next, you monitor the experiment. This is another place where you will find big tech has an advantage. They have internal tools that are incredibly powerful. So I can launch an experiment. I can check it the next day. I get automatically generated dashboard that has all the metrics we're tracking, showing me which ones are trending in a positive direction, which are trending in a negative direction, which ones are remaining neutral. And it's giving me an idea of the statistical significance, which we say a lot and is a mouthful. Statistical significance. So to make sure that the data we're getting, whether we can be confident in it or not. So when we've chosen, let's say we want to improve the clicks, we decide how many users, how many clicks we need, so that we can have statistical significance in the results. Like if you show the same thing to 2 people and one clicks and one doesn't, who knows if that's a trend, right? You show it to 1 million people and 5% more click, then you're starting to see that something is actually going on there. So The other thing that goes on with monitoring is, again, those guardrails, right? You're looking to see if any of your guardrails are being violated early. The big one for us at Twitter and at Pinterest and everyone else is crashes. Is there a bug in the experiment? Happens a lot because your engineers are writing something that there's a good chance you're going to throw away. Maybe they're a little more careless. Maybe. And so there's a crash. There's a crash in prod due to, changing the color of the button, which is not too far off of what I've seen, surprisingly. And you have to end the experiment early, or you're seeing that, okay, you were willing to sacrifice 5% of users viewing fewer tweets, but half of them view fewer tweets. Something's really wrong. Like they're opening the app, they're seeing your red button, and they're just closing it. So you end the experiment early. That's what you're looking for when you're monitoring, those real red flags. But you get to the end, no reason to shut down. You've got the data. Now you analyze the data. This is another point that could be really fun because you've got all your data. You usually, if you've got someone, you give it to the data scientists and they run analysis and they come back. So I've got that dashboard, right? And it's giving me an overall view, but the data scientists, they're going to go a little deeper. They're going to ask all those whys or the 3 questions. They're going to do things like they're going to notice, okay, in Japan, this was doing really well or really poorly, but for this experiment, we're going to exclude Japan. Or they're going to be like, the Blue Jays won a game, and that's why there was a preference for that color blue. So we're going to remove that weekend because it was affecting the data. They're going to segment it. They're going to do all the things. And this is a real pain in the butt because you will get that dashboard and it will look good. And you'll go to the data scientists and like, it looks good, right? And they'll be like, no, it does not look good. And this is specifically why. And it really can hurt your feelings. They are the Debbie Downers of the experiment. And then they can even ruin the opposite when you have extremely good results, like beyond question, there can be nothing wrong with it. And then still they're like, that data is too good. I don't trust it. And I saw this happen. And that's when we get to one of my favorite examples, which is the AA experiment. So we ran an experiment at Twitter. And our hypothesis was that we could probably make this 1% better. And the results came back, it was over 5% better. And so we were blown away. We were so excited. Like this experiment had blown the doors off, done way better. And the data scientist was like, that is too good. That, based on previous experiments and everything we know, that change should have been incapable of making that much of an improvement. So then they're like, we have to run an AA experiment. And these I've only seen for this reason. They're so weird and fun. That's where you run the experiment and you run the exact same version of something against itself. So you have the original gray button, the gray buy now button. You run it against the gray buy now button. Those are the 2 versions. There's no difference. And what you're doing is you're validating the system that the experiment runs on, that it has nothing that's affecting your experiment that you didn't account for, that you weren't aware of. It also helps account for noise in the system. So there's a lot of factors, like I'm talking about Japan, I'm talking about, people's special weekends for various things happening. There's a lot of noise. And maybe there's just too much noise in the system that you didn't know. And so you need more data than you thought you did or something else. So you run an AA experiment. So we run this AA experiment on the exact same tweet, exactly the same. And one performed 5% better than the other. And I was so heartbroken because it proved that our experiment had in fact likely failed and that there was something else. And boy, I'm really eating up the time. I don't want to go into this too much but I'll explain briefly kind of what happened because it's the algorithm, which I know Elon Musk likes to talk a lot and I don't like talking about it, but the algorithm isn't a thing. It's like a bunch of things. But one of the things that it is, those nebulous machine learning models that you put data in and you get something out and who knows why, whatever. And so when the algorithm is showing you tweets it thinks you will like on Twitter, right? It's kind of trying to figure out which tweets do people like you like, right? And also generally like what's a good tweet, like what's generally popular. And when it does that test, boy, I'm not a machine learning engineer, so I'm really like have a superficial understanding, but it's showing it to a few people. Let's say it shows the tweet to 100 people and just sees, do they like it? Do they look at it? Were they clicking on it? And if they do, well, then it's like, okay, I'm going to I got an idea that this is a good tweet and it'll show it more, and it kind of can snowball. And so what was happening is we had two versions of the exact same tweet that we were testing, but one in those first 100, before it was statistically significant, got a few more clicks and it snowballed earlier. And as far as our experiment was concerned, the same number of people saw the tweet, but that one that was snowballed early, just due to luck, it got preferential treatment. So it got better position, shown a bit early, like very slight changes we hadn't accounted for that was allowing it to perform better. And so then, of course, what do? Well, you either need your model to account for what you're doing or you need more data, different things. But yeah, it really ruined my day. Then we come to the second of the last steps of running an experiment in big tech, and this is the ship, no ship meeting. So you've got the data, you've got what the data scientist says happen, and you have a meeting with all your stakeholders. So it's, I kind of glossed over the stakeholder part, but again, working in ads, right? I have what I think is important, right? Click-through rate, let's say. We have a lot of ideas like a good click, which is a click that lasts a certain amount of time, so that people actually have shown value in what they're doing. But there are other stakeholders, right? There are people working in different parts of the product. So that might be doing general video views outside of ads, just views, people who are, concerned about the performance of the app, what we call the hitch rate, right? Which is how many times the app pauses while you're scrolling. So if users are scrolling really fast, how often does it pause to pull in more data, or maybe it's dropping frames to load a video. So you get all those people in the room to talk about the experiment and whether you can ship it, which is to put it in prod. It goes from the experiment to being the experience that users see. And there's 3 outcomes here, which is, yay, you can ship it. That's what we all hope for. And like I said, you're usually sad. I think at Twitter, 80% of experiments ended up in one of the later 2 buckets, which is that they don't become prod, so it's outright bad and you won't ship it. Or it's mixed, click-through rate went up, the number of tweets viewed went down, the hitch rate went up, and then it's a debate, right, between all the stakeholders on what happens next. And most often it won't go to prod, but what happens is this next step, which is the thing big tech loves to do, and which is really another difference between running an experiment and what big tech does, which is iterating. So we have that hypothesis that informed our experiment, and the experiment is not going to ship, but we have learned something. And what can we do with that learning to make the next iteration of that experiment better? Sometimes it's really clear, and you can go to a designer and give them the results, and they're like, oh, the user experience can account for whatever by making the button more green instead of more red. I know that's really simplifying, but it's what Google did. It's sometimes more complicated, and sometimes it takes months to come up with the next version. You're maybe doing a bit more research, having your research team doing some research on why users might have done things that you didn't expect, etc. But then you do run another version. And that's the iteration, that's the cycle. And the other form of iteration that I'd like to talk about, though, is sometimes you get someone on the team who has an idea you already had. Usually it's say a PM that just joined the company and they're like, we should make that button greener. And you're like, we ran that experiment and it failed. But sometimes it's someone like a PM who's been there for 10 years and they're like, remember when we ran that button that was green? We should try again. And sometimes we do. I know this is an old meme. I just love it. It didn't work for them, but it might work for us. The thing is, sometimes it does work the second time, and I'm going to explain why. So back 2008, when I was first at Zoo, there was research to show that all the important stuff on your website had to be above the fold. It had to be where the user would see it without scrolling, because users would not scroll. But if we look at modern users, they will scroll a lot. If you go to any product page on apple.com, they expect you to scroll. There's animations happening. There's a significant amount of important information is not above the fold. So at some point, users started scrolling. So you could run those experiments that said, hey, it has to be above the fold, run them now, and that data would no longer be valid. User behavior has changed. So that's part of what experimentation does as well, which ties us back to formal science, which is you're responding to change, and that's adaptation, right? So experimentation helps you adapt as well. And I just want to share this quote from Charles Darwin talking about how adaptation is a facet of survival. So another reason I want to convince you to do some experimentation, even without big tech scale, is because it's an attribute of survival. Your business survival is adaptation. There can be new user preferences. You can either adapt your product to best suit current user behavior, which is what the majority of our experimentation is doing, or you can adapt the product to fit new user behavior, new user preferences. An example is happening right now at Instagram. This is a tweet from last month where the head of Instagram said that in some markets they are testing changing the first uh, open experience for Instagram from the classic scrollable feed of photos to Instagram Reels. And that's obviously in response to the changed user preference for TikTok like experiences versus the old Twitter and Instagram experience of viewing text and images that they scroll kind of seamlessly. Okay, I know I've been talking for like half an hour. This is what you want to say. Get to the point. I haven't even answered that third why. I'm about to. I have one more video and one more apology, I think. So to frame what I'm thinking about in like formal science, I think no, I don't know where I got this. I might have had AI do this actually, so I might have lied. But the purpose of experimentation in science is to basically to help understand the universe, right? And to drive home what I'm about to say, because I may not have convinced you since I'm meandering a lot. I want to share a clip from a CEO I used to work for where he reflects on the mistakes he made early at Twitter. He doesn't talk about experimentation, but he talks about data.
Which thing have you done along the way that you consider to be the biggest mistake that if you could go back and change, you would do differently?
Well, for Twitter, it was a lack of focus on the data, on the numbers, on what the system was doing, on what the users were doing. We didn't have strong internal dashboards of what the system or the actual business was doing. So we were speculating a lot on what was happening, and it caused a lot of downtime in the early days. And the speculation creates all this contention and conflict and all these debates. When if you can just look at the data, you can see, oh, that's what's happening. So we obviously need to go this way.
All right, see, and the part is where he said he didn't know what the system or the actual business was doing. So, in my opinion, why you should experiment, why it's valuable to experiment. The purpose of experimentation, in my opinion, in technology is to discover and understand how the business works. Okay, how do users behave? What is driving your important outcomes? Where does friction exist? And so on. What are the assumptions, the understandings you have that may be incorrect or maybe have changed? Or what opportunities exist that you haven't yet realized or fully realized? And a more concrete example of how I've come to this conclusion is, again, back in ads. When I work in ads, we hire sometimes exceptionally talented programmers, software engineers, also designers, and they come from all kinds of industries. Very rarely do they have previous ads experience. I mean, sometimes we've hired someone that's come from Meta and they have a lot of existing experience, but we hire someone who knows their tech stack. So I work a lot in iPhones. They know UIKit or they know Swift. They know it so well. They know Safari and all the calls and the API, but they don't understand how advertising works. They have that superficial advertising understanding that we show a banner and we want people to click on it. They don't understand the guardrails or the trade-offs we make. They don't understand the relationship between hitching rate, etc. And the best way to teach them that is to have them review experiments, have them go to those ship, no ship decisions meetings, have them go to the meetings where we're planning the hypothesis or so on, have them run an experiment. They're going to learn so fast when their heart is broken because they see their experiment violated an important guardrail. And then just like we iterate, have them run more experiments because experiments are cheap. I actually have like a JIRA list of good first tasks for people who join. And it's like, hey, why don't you go try and make that title blue? And then just let them do it and see what happens. It's such a great way to learn the business. And I have a little aside here, which is The other thing, I mean, this is a bit of a tangent, but there's so much value in having your individual contributors understand your business, right? It plays out in so many different ways. There's kind of like the high level stuff, like you're making a new app and you go to your iOS developer and you're like, should we use React Native or should we use UIKit? Well, if they understand those two tech stacks really well, they can tell you the trade-offs. Maybe one has a higher hitching rate, one has lower development time or a more stable connection to the server, et cetera, right? And they can tell you that. But if they understand your business, they can start to apply it to the problems you have. They might say, hey, in Twitter, hitch rate's really important. We have to use UIKit. Or they can say, your point of sale app, hitch rate does not matter, but that constant connection to the server and being able to iframe in web content, that's really critical. We have to use React Native. And maybe it's not so clear. Sometimes it's just that they come, they join, they're making another change in the software, and they're like, hey, I know that if I do this, the hitch rate could go up if I don't catch this one exception, blah, blah, blah. Being business minded has so many benefits. So you want your team to understand as much as possible. So when I say learning the business, it's not just leadership. It's not just like, it's at every level of the company. So it's the same for you, just like someone joining the team. You already know your business, right? But running experiments can help you test these things. What assumptions are true, what's changed? I think I already said that. We're almost done. So big tech on their side has scale. They have scale of users, they have scale of reach, they have, all those things. You don't need scale. And I'm going to go with my favorite example of not needing scale, which is from another Barcamp talk I gave, I think 2015, where I talked about, to the best of my ability, how it was that Einstein had come up with a theory of relativity at the time that he did, because what was exceptional about it is that his theory predicted gravitational lensing. It predicted gravitational waves well before we could observe either of those. We were not possible. And I don't really understand how it happened, but I did some research at the time. And so I had a few quotes like this one. Maxwell's equations had come out. Obviously, we're describing the electromagnetic spectrum in new and exciting ways, and Einstein saw that they were true, but saw that there were other parts of data that weren't exactly in conflict, but suggested that something else was at play. He knew that something else was going on. And even without direct observation, he came up with a theory of relativity that was correct, matched all the data he had, and made predictions about the future that were also correct. Big tech is like they have the telescope that can observe the stars near the sun and go, oh, gravitational lensing. There it is. I see it. I observe it. I have the scale to know that's happening. You maybe don't have the scale, but you can have enough data to know there's something else at play. There's a new opportunity. There's a changed user behavior, and you can get enough data to see it. So hopefully I have lit a fire. I was talking to a friend just yesterday about this talk, and she said, oh, I know we should experiment, but it's so hard. And so hopefully this talk, maybe there's a few of you in the room who have been like, you should do experiments or do more experiments. And hopefully I've motivated you to. So know your business, learn about your business, trust the data, hopefully have fun. And that's it. Thank you for attending my talk. Mr. Hagee goes to San Francisco. What should I do? Sure.
I think we have a few minutes for some questions and answers. If people in the audience don't have any questions, no questions. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, we got one right up here.
Get a chance to talk about Elon Musk.
Oh,
Everyone turn off your phones, please.
I'm just not a big fan. I'll clarify what happened. I was let go in the very first wave. And so he really hurt my feelings. Tony.
When you're talking about guardrails, one guardrail that can rear its head is the guardrail of brand versus utility. Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, there are some things. There's that saying that you optimize for what you can measure, right? And so the things that are easy to measure or possible to measure are easier to involve in those decisions, in the plan and in the decision at the end. But there are some things that are can't be measured, like brand. And basically you need those stakeholders at every step reminding you, right? And one example I didn't go into, like there's different kinds of big tech companies. So Google Meta, most of us do lots of experimentation because that's kind of how we operate. Apple doesn't do very many experiments. You know, they're making decisions. What they're selling you and what they're doing, and I love Apple, is you're getting their taste, right? Like their taste and their brand experience is what they're going to give you. Even if the color of orange that my phone is isn't the one that will sell the most, it is the one that their taste has determined is the right one, and they're going to make that available. So yeah, there have to be some things that are beyond reproach. Yeah.
Interesting. I was wondering how many people buy the orange phone, but I think it's the most popular one.
I don't know. I had to buy it though. I love the color orange. Actually, it's probably peak iPhone. I was thinking I might have this one forever.
Nice. Oh yeah, other questions? There's one way at the back there. Speak up.
I'm just wondering if like the big tech companies invest as much into like direct observation, and how maybe your team, being a data team, would contradict those views or their findings or their learnings, and like maybe how big those teams are and how they kind of work the product.
In the past, I have worked with those teams more closely. Actually, when I was at Point Two, sometimes we would do like direct user testing, and I could observe it. That was cool. What happens now, though, is we kind of give them an idea of like, hey, we're kind of curious, you know, how people shop on Twitter. Like, you know, how do they buy products? And then they go off and kind of take that and they design their own, you know, tests or data research. And then they come back a few months later and they have a big presentation and they just show us the results. And so it's like, I'm so far removed. But on the other hand, they are really, really good at their job, like really good. And the data they give us is so nuanced and so interesting. I don't know. Does that answer your question? Is that what you were wondering?
I guess like how would you like settle a debate if the data shows one direction, but maybe something more in the field?
Oh, they disagreed.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, we're almost always going to go with the data, but because hopefully, I mean, we've got to have that confidence in the data. But if direct user testing shows one thing, then we've got to understand, you know, why did it differ? Was there something about the sample of people we tested with or something that was different? I will say, though, I haven't seen a lot of differences. Like sometimes there are nuances or the change is less or more than we expected or there's something else at play, but I've never seen like huge differences.
So do you think like millions of data points equals a good like focus group user test group kind of thing?
Oh boy. I don't know if I'd say that. They're kind of sometimes different problems. You're testing different things. I really don't think there's a replacement for working with users and talking to them and seeing them interact, right? Like when we're collecting 1 million data points of what someone's clicking on, it's hard to answer the why, right? We have to have a hypothesis for why did they do that. But if you observe them using it and you see them click or not click, you can either see why they did or didn't do it or ask them. So it's kind of like you're learning different things. Does that?
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Yeah, okay.
Other questions? Right down here.
So fairly new to experimenting or A/B testing. When you're trying to get this data, are you doing it like, I feel like this is a very basic question, but like on the website or on the app, like, and it's to everybody, like, are you making it public or like, are you?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I could have gone into that a bit. So it is in production. Actually, what we do is we test on employees first, and that's the worst because you'll be trying to use the app for some reason and it'll crash or you'll suddenly have something weird happening. So we always test on employees, but it has to go to production, go to real users. Yeah. Yeah. A certain percentage. Yeah. And actually we try and choose the lowest amount of time and the lowest percentage that we have to get data we're confident in. So like an A/B test, I said you'd show it to 50-50, but ideally you're leaving 99% alone and you're testing on 1%. Yeah, something like that.
I remember going to a presentation that YouTube did in San Francisco, like, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago, they can do an A/B test in like 2 minutes because they had that much traffic. So it's kind of crazy how fast stuff that can actually
Yeah.
happen. Yeah, when you said sometimes it takes an afternoon, I thought that was like a long time.
It depends. It depends where you're making the change, right? Like if you're making a change on every video on YouTube, you get a ton of data. But let's say it's the context menu of an image, you're going to need to do that for longer.
Maybe we got time for one or two more. Yeah, we'll go here and then over there.
Any tips or tricks for not being sad about results?
I don't know.
You don't know Nathan, that's why.
Yeah, that's like a well-being thing. I don't know. I mean,
And I guess, hold on, I should mention, like,
that's okay.
if I'm the one doing the testing and we're delivering it to teams, how can I help them be less sad about the idea that they were really stoked on?
Emphasize the learning, right? Like, what have you learned? Even if the user hasn't done what you had hoped, you've learned something, and that's valuable. And also, if you are going to iterate, hopefully there's going to be a next iteration. Get them moving on to the next thing, seeing the opportunity to do something again, and then it's in the past.
Turn a negative into a positive. Get to do it again. Colin?
Just gonna ask, how do you guys balance the constant struggle between iteration and innovation? Because they function differently, right?
Yeah. That's a huge question. And it's like, I'm starting to do my planning for our 2026 first quarter and second quarter projects right now. And so we come up with a big long list of things we could do, some innovative, some experimentation, and then we have people more important than us tell us which ones they want to do. That's it.
That's it. One more, if we have one more quick one. Okay.
How do you bring on board a leadership to do more testing?
Oh yeah. Sometimes they're really into it, and sometimes they're not. I don't know. It usually honestly falls on the product owner, the product team, maybe design. Honestly, engineers, when we try and convince leadership of things, it doesn't always work out so well. So I usually bring it to my product partner and say, hey, we really want to do this, and it seems like they're not very interested. And they come up with a really good argument that kind of sells on it. So I don't have a great answer. I don't know. I've had quite a few times where I've tried and I've been like, this metric's going to go up and the infrastructure going to blah, blah, blah. And it just hasn't worked. So I don't have a great answer.
Perfect ending. No answer. Let's give it one more time for Nate Hagee. Great talk. Thanks, Nate.